to talk to you today about your next main reading assignment, which will be the Aeneid. And I've enlisted help from a variety of you today. So before we get started, I need you all to close your laptops and put all of your smartphones away. You won't need them today at all. You're free to take notes by hand if you want, but most importantly, we're going to be doing poetry. We're going to be listening to poetry. And it's going to be very, very important that you focus and listen to the poetry. Okay? All right, are we ready to go? You don't need to take notes. Actually, we're going to record this, and it'll be available to you as a YouTube video. All right, so you don't have to worry about taking notes. I just want you to listen to the poetry. We're going to talk about the poetry. The title of my presentation, or this, actually, I'm just going to orchestrate the efforts of a variety of you whom I have asked to participate in this competition today, is I want to persuade you, I want to make an argument about why you should be reading the Aeneid. Right? Human beings from a whole variety of cultures from around the world have been composing poetry for millennia. And to select from all of those poetic compositions, the Aeneid, I believe, requires some explanation. So what I want to do today is make an argument why you should spend approximately the next week working through this text. Let me start with the first reason, and then I'm going to try to make this argument over the course of our common session today. The first reason is that this is the greatest poem, the most, shall we say, the greatest poetic accomplishment of a poet, Publius Vergilius Maro. So this is, so we'll mention just in a few minutes that this wasn't the only poem or poetic composition of Virgil, but it was by far and away the greatest. Virgil is the greatest, and I'm willing to argue this with anybody who wants to challenge this, and you're welcome to do that, is the greatest poet of the Roman Empire. So this is the best, most accomplished poem by the most accomplished, the greatest poet of the Roman Empire. And I would go so far as to argue that the Roman Empire is one of the most significant political systems in the history of humankind. It was a political system that dominated areas of the Mediterranean, and in fact the entire Mediterranean at some points, for a millennium, 1,000 years. And in the context of this course, and you know why we teach this course, right? We teach this course to prevent another Holocaust. That's what this course is really all about. That the Nazis tried to recreate this in the mid-20th century, a process, an endeavor that resulted in the catastrophic loss of life. 60 million deaths. So this empire that we're talking about was not only significant when it was an empire, but it's become significant even in our lifetimes as a model of what some politically ambitious people would like to establish again. Reason number 4. This is a poem that Virgil composed for, arguably, the most powerful person to have ever walked the planet, Caesar Augustus. So it's the best poem by the greatest poem by one of the most significant and important political systems, or a person that I would argue was the most powerful person to have ever walked this planet. Should we read it? Might be good to know what's in it, right? That's what I'm thinking. But there are some other reasons too. This poem became the poetic touchstone, if you will, for the next 1,500 years. It defined what it meant to be a Roman. It articulated the history, the understanding, the formation of the Roman Empire, and it became, for the next 1.5 millennia, the sine qua non of the educational, intellectual system of the Western world. So I want just 2 examples of why this is an important text for us to understand. And I want to be right out front in saying that the Roman Empire, this is not an apology for the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire did some things that were very beneficial and good. It did some things that were very terrible. Right? Augustus, too, was a person of enormous political power. And I'm going to approach this in the Max Weber sense of power as applied or as understood in 3 different types. That is power, political power, wealth and prestige, social power. So Augustus was a very powerful person, in some ways good, in some ways bad, right? So this is not an apology. This is simply a declaration of the historical fact of this empire and of this person that dominated it, and the person that created this poem, that still to this day influences our cultural landscape. All right, so here's your first example. A little bit later in the semester, you're going to be reading the Confessions of Augustine. Right? And in this work, you're going to be reading a very important moment in the life of Augustine, where he converts finally to this fairly new religious system, right? Christianity. Maybe some of you have known this, maybe some of you read it, but we're going to read it today. All right. So who has my first passage? You do. Would you read for them? This comes from book 10? No, book 8. This is book 8 of the Confessions, section 29. All right. The events that he's going to read about. This is Augustine in his memoir, if you will, in his Confessions, talking about this moment that took place in the year 386 CE. Okay? Read for us, would you please? Stand up. Address your audience in your most Augustine voice, your most sort of preachy voice, if you will.
Okay. As I was saying this, and weeping in the bitter agony of my heart, suddenly I heard a voice from the nearby house, chanting as if it might be a boy or a girl, I do not know which, saying and repeating over and over again, "Pick up and read, pick up and read." At once my countenance changed, and I began to think intently whether there might be some sort of children's game in which such a chant is used, but I could not remember having heard of one. I checked the flood of tears and stood up. I interpreted it solely as a divine command to me to open the book and read the first chapter I might find, for I had heard how Antony happened to be present at the gospel reading, and took it as an admonition addressed to himself when the words were read. "Go, sell all you have, give to the poor, and you shall have treasure in heaven. Come and follow me." By such an inspired utterance, he was immediately converted to you. So I hurried back to the place where Alepius was sitting. There I had put down the book of the apostle when I got up. I seized it, opened it, and in silence read the first passage on which my eyes lit. "Not in riots and drunken parties, not in eroticism and indecencies, not in strife and rivalry, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ, and make no provision for the flesh and its lusts." I neither wished nor needed to read further. At once, with the last words of this sentence, it was as if a light of relief from all anxiety flooded into my heart. All of the shadows of doubt were dispelled.
Thank you, Augustine. Thank you. Thank you. Nicely done. What Augustine was doing, he picked up this book, right? It happened to be the letter of Paul to the Romans, right? And he decided, following the model of Anthony, that he was going to open it up, put his finger someplace, and that was going to be, if you will, an oracular utterance for him about how he should live his life, right? This whole concept of opening up a book and picking something at random was not new. Anthony had done it, he mentioned Anthony. Romans had been doing this for centuries. And for the 400 years before Augustine in this garden decides to do this with a copy of the letter of Paul to the Romans had been doing this with what text?
Similar books.
Nope. What text? The Aeneid. Time after time after time, the Romans would do exactly this. In fact, they refer to this as the Sortes Virgilianae, right? Virgil and this work had achieved a status, immediate recognition in the empire, but it had achieved a status of oracular nature. People believed that they could choose a passage at random in this text that would in some way speak to them and reveal to them divine will. Augustine was doing something that Romans did all the time. What is interesting about Augustine is it's not with the Aeneid, but it's with the letter of Paul to the Romans. But that was a common thing. And before Virgil, they did it with what text? Greatest poetic accomplishment in the history of humankind? The Iliad, the Homeric poems. You read about this, for example, in the last days of Socrates. Okay, Plato talks about Socrates. How did he know when he was going to die? He did this with the text of the Homeric poems. So Virgil becomes this sort of, divine prophetic voice, right? So it makes perfect sense that when you read another text later on in the semester, that Virgil appears again, right? And that text is going to be the Divine Comedy. And here we have a passage from the Divine Comedy. Dante, and of course his escort, his leader, is none other than who? Virgil is leading him into the Inferno. And here they are in limbo. Okay, this is where Virgil normally lives. And they encounter, well, let's find out who they encounter in this moment in limbo. Thank you.
And as he spoke, a voice rang on the air. Honor the Prince of Poets. The soul and glory that went from us returns. He is here. He is here. The cry ceased, and the echo passed from hearing. I saw 4 mighty presences come towards us, with neither joy nor sorrow in their bearing. Note well, my master said as they came on, that soul that leads the rest with sword in hand as if he were their captain and champion. It is Homer, singing master of the earth. Next after him is Horace, the satirist. Ovid is third, and Lucan is the fourth. Since all of these have part in the high name the voice proclaimed, calling me Prince of Poets, the honor that they do me honors them.
Thank you. The Prince of Poets. Okay, so even Homer himself recognizes Virgil as the Prince of Poets. All right, well, does that give you some sense of how important the Aeneid was? Right? Let me talk a little bit about the poet. The poet himself, Publius Vergilius Maro, born October 15th, 70 BCE. He dies 51 years later in Brindisium on September the 21st, 19 BCE. He was roughly contemporaneous with the person for whom he wrote this poem, the Aeneid, Augustus. Augustus born 63 BCE and lived until AD 14 and has died in his 74th year. So, what about this poem? Well, This was something unprecedented in the cultural landscape of the Roman Empire. There had been epic poets before in the Roman world, in the Latin-speaking world. For example, most importantly, Ennius, who wrote the Annales, right, in 7 books. This was a history of the Romans from its foundation to the life of Cato the Elder. It was also written in dactylic hexameter, a metrical system that was characteristic of Greek epic poetry. But this was something very different. What Virgil managed to do, and this is a work of truly staggering genius, is that he managed to incorporate the literary tradition, not just of the Greeks, but of the Hellenistic kingdoms and of his own cultural context. And he managed to incorporate this literary tradition and rework it in the story of the founding of Rome, or the arrival of the Trojan refugees and the establishment of Lavinium. He managed to do this in a way that defined what it meant to be a Roman and how Rome got to be this dominant political force in the Mediterranean, including all of the Greek-speaking areas of the Mediterranean. So you will read this. When you read this, you will see that it is based on the Iliad and the Odyssey, right? The first 6 books are essentially the Odyssean part, and the second 6 books are essentially the Iliadic part. The references to Homeric poems are everywhere, but there are also references, and Virgil managed to incorporate literary allusions from a wide range of poetry. Most importantly, Ennius, of course, but also poets that came before him, for example, Catullus, right? And also the Hellenistic poets, for example, Apollonius of Rhodes, who wrote the Argonautica, and you're going to read in book 4 of the Aeneid, is based largely on the Argonautica. It's an homage, if you will, to the previous epic poets. But this is something that is encyclopedic, okay? He does what all great writers and poets do. They take the tradition. He was a student of the tradition, and he reworks that tradition for his own time, for his own people, and passes it on to the next generation. Literary composition, poetry of this stature, is not just something he makes up, right? He makes it up. He assimilates the tradition that he received. I'll give you just one example. He knew his Homer so well that he knew, for example, that in the Homeric poetry, the surviving Homeric poetry, a word, strophus, appears one time. Is the Greek word for top, as in the toy top. He uses the Latin equivalent of that exactly one time. Now that is knowing one's Homer, right? Okay? And I challenge you to watch for it when it's going to happen. Okay. All right. What does it mean to be a Homer? What does it mean to be a Roman? Well, to understand Roman society, we've got to talk about a couple of conventions, okay? And the first and the most important, and I'm going to use the writings of Virgil himself to describe these. These are 2 really important concepts for you to understand as you engage with this Roman culture. The first one is a concept called patria potestas, okay? Patria potestas, which really means the power, the authority of a father. Roman society was based on the notion that the father held really the rights of life and death over members of his family. And this right, this privilege, this position that the father held in his society lasted until he died. If my father were still alive, I would be, even though I had my own family, I would still be, according to the Romans, an adolescens, an adolescent. Until my father died, I was essentially part of his family. Right? He was the pater potestas. So this is a really important sense. So let's look at this in action, okay? So this is from book 2 of the Aeneid, right? It's a very important moment. Aeneas, of course, Troy is falling. Aeneas's mother, Venus, has revealed to him that Troy is going to fall. It's lost. There's nothing he can do. The least he can do at this point is to get out of Troy. And so Venus says, take care of your family, get them out of here. And so he goes back to his home. Let's listen to what happens. Okay? Please.
At last, gaining the door of father's ancient house, my first concern was to find the man, my first wish to spirit him off into the high mountain range. But father, seeing Ilium raised from the earth, refused to drag his life out now and suffer exile.
You in your prime, untouched by age, your blood still coarse and strong, your hearts of oak, you are the ones to hurry your escape. Myself, if the gods on high had wished me to live on, they would have saved my palace for a year. Enough, more than enough, that I have seen, one sack of my city, once survived its capture. Here I lie, here laid out for death. Come say your parting salutes and leave my body so. I will find my own death, sword in hand. My enemies, keen for spoils, will be so kind. Death without burial, a small price to pay. For years now I've lingered out my life, despised by the gods, a dead weight to man, ever since the father of gods and king of mortals stormed at me with his bolt and scorched me with fire.
So he said, planted there. Nothing could shake him now, but we dissolved in tears. My wife, Crusa, Ascanius, the whole household, begging my father not to pull our lives down with him, adding his own weight to the fate that dragged us down. He still refuses, holds to his resolve, clings to the spot, and again I rush to arms, desperate to die myself. Where could I turn? What were our chances now at this point? What, I cried, did you, my own father, dream that I could run away and desert you here? How could such an outrage slip from a father's lips? If it please the gods that nothing of our great city shall survive, if you are bent on adding your own death to the deaths of Troy and of all your loved ones too, the doors of the deaths you crave are spread wide open.
Thank you. Aeneas rushes home. All right? Troy is falling, we've got to get out. Anchises, his father, says, nope, I'm not going anywhere. Okay, we're staying, we're dying. There's no sense at any point that Aeneas says, okay, Dad, if that's what you really want, good luck with that, we're going. Okay, never. If the pater says we're staying, we stay. So not only does the pater have the power and the authority within this particular familial unit, but it's the responsibility, it's the duty of the children to obey that and to recognize that, to celebrate that. Anchises says, we're not going, we're not going. I'm going to prepare to die, I'm going to do whatever I can, but I'm not going. Until Anchises says, okay, we're going, we stay put. That is a really important concept to understand the Romans. We'll come back to that. The next really important concept is the concept of clientela, that is the patron-client relationship. Just as the concept of the patria potestas moderated or was the protocol that operated within a kinship group, the concept or the convention of the patron-client relationship involved the relationships of people between kinship groups. Every person in the Roman Empire was, in some way, a client, a cliens, to someone else, a patronus, of some social or political authority, of higher social or political authority. Everyone in the Roman society operated this way. Many people were patroni, okay? Many people were patrons, okay? And those who had the most clients were the most powerful. This patronage, this patron-client relationship, one of the interesting characteristics about it is that it was a part of one's patrimony. That is, and of course, I hasten to add that only men, okay, and this is not an apology for the Roman society, this is just the way it was, and it has lots of negative consequences. Men were the patrons, right? Women were the clientes, right? That doesn't mean that women couldn't exert influence and so on, but within the whole sort of Roman social context, the men were the patroni and the women were the clientes. But an interesting thing about this is that this concept of clientela, this patron-client relationship, was something that belonged to one's patrimony. In other words, I would inherit the clientes of my father. Now, let's read about what this means in the Roman context, okay? A little bit later, okay? Troy is fallen, Anchises, because of some divine portents, is on board with the whole idea of leading, all right? And they're going away, and this is the great moment, Aeneas, that has been captured in a whole variety of sort of artistic representations. Aeneas carrying his father, with taking a little Ascanius in his arms, or maybe pulling him along hand in hand. Off they go as refugees from this catastrophic capture of Troy, and off they go. Off they go, but for some reason, Creusa gets separated from them. So when they get to their meeting place, he realizes that Creusa is not there, and so he goes back. Right? Let's read this moment, okay? Who do we have out there? We've got Creusa, and all right, very good, excellent. We've got Aeneas and Creusa. There they are, Aeneas and Creusa. Very good. All right. Turn around and face them, okay?
Why, I even dared fling my voice through the dark. My shouts filled the streets as time and again. Overcome with grief, I called out, Creusa. Nothing. No reply. And again, Creusa. But then, as I madly rushed from house to house, no end in sight, abruptly, right before my eyes, I saw her stricken ghost, my own Creusa shape. But larger than life, the life I had known so well, I froze. My hackles bristled. My voice choked in my throat, and my wife spoke out to ease me of my anguish.
My dear husband, why so eager to give yourself to such mad flights of grief? It's not without the will of the gods these things have come to pass. But the gods forbid you to take Creusa with you, bound from Troy together. The king of lofty Olympus went flower. A long exile is your fate, the vast plains of the sea are yours to plow until you reach Hesperian lands, where Lydian Tiber flows with its smooth march through the rich and lonely fields, a land of hard people. There great joy in a kingdom yours to claim, and a queen to make your wife. Dispel your tears for Creusa whom you love. I will never behold the high and mighty pride of their palaces, the Myrmidons, the Daltons, or go as a slave to some Greek matron. No, not I, daughter of Dardanus, that I am, the wife of Venus' son. The great mother of gods detains me on these shores, and now farewell. Hold dear the son you share, we love together.
These were her parting words, and for all my tears, I longed to say so much, dissolving into the empty air she left me now. 3 times I tried to fling my arms around her neck. 3 times I embraced. Nothing. Her phantom shifting through my fingers, light as the wind, quick as a dream in flight. Gone, and at last the night was over. Back I went to my people, and I was amazed to see what throngs of new companions had poured in to swell our numbers. Mothers, men, our forces gathered for exile, grieving masses. They had come together from every quarter, belongings, spirits ready for me to lead them over the sea to whatever land I chose.
Excellent. Well done. Thank you. Some important things about this. First of all, you scholars of the Homeric poems, anything in that passage sound just even just a little bit familiar? What does he try to do after Creusa speaks to him? What does he try to do? You remember that? 3 times I tried to fling my arms around her neck. 3 times I embraced nothing. Her phantom sifting through my fingers. Where have you heard that before? Yes?
Is that a parallel Odysseus and his mother?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Where else? Iliad. You're on, I see that.
Is it when Zeus was here?
Not when Zeus. Who appears to Achilles? Well, yes, but Patroclus, right? Patroclus comes to him in a dream and they try to embrace, and 3 times the same thing happens. Virgil knows his Homer, right? And he takes that idea and he incorporates it into this particular poem. This is not plagiarism. This is an homage. This is what great poets do. They take the tradition and they rework it in their way. Right? And you can see at the end of this that this is really about Aeneas now as a patronus, Aeneas as a patron who has all of these people to take care of. Right? And they are going to enter into this patron-client relationship. It works like this. The patron takes care of his clients in whatever way he can, and the clients help the patron in whatever ways they can. And in the Roman context, this most frequently, or we see it most frequently in voting, right? So if I'm an important Roman politician, my clients will come out and vote for me, right? That's one. One of the most, we're going to come back to this, is a really important thing about clientela. The most powerful form of clientela was the patron-client relationship between the general and his soldiers. We'll come back to that in a minute. All right, so Virgil has taken this literary, as you can hear, this echo, he's taken this literary tradition, but he has to, in some way, as Propertius, another poet of this period, predicted, he has to come up with something that is better, in some way, than the Homeric poems. Well, how can this poem surpass the Homeric poems? Well, one way is for the hero, Aeneas, to surpass the heroes of the Homeric poems, right? So let's look at one comparison that Virgil makes in the poem. And this is our next one, okay? This is from book 7 of the Iliad. So this is now the Iliadic half of the Aeneid. Who has that? All right, read to us what's happening. This is from the very beginning. He has been to the underworld, maybe, and they're now sailing on. You can remember what our Creusa just said about what's going to happen to him. She mentions a particular place, right? Let's listen to hear what Virgil has to say about Aeneas now sailing after having been to the underworld. Go ahead.
In death, Sayaka Aeneas' nurse, Isu, have granted on shores a fame that never dies. And now your honor preserves your resting place. And if such glories, any glory at all, your name marks out your bones in the great land of the west. And the boats Aeneas now, the last rites performed, and the brave mount piled high, once the seas lie calm, sets sail on its journey, puts the ports astir. Freshening breezes blow as night comes on, and a full moon speeds their course. Its dancing light strikes sparkles off the waves, and they closely skirt the coast of
Circes,
where the sun's rich daughter makes her deadly blows resound with her endless song and beat in her proud call. She kindles fragrant cedar flaring through the night, as her vibrant shuttle sweeps her fine spun blue. From there you could hear the furious brawls of lions, bristling at their chains, roaring into the dead of night. The raging of bristly boars and bears caged in their pens, and the looming forms of howling wolves, the men whose shapes the brutal goddess Circe changed with her mocking drugs. Stripped them out in the heights and looked of wild beasts. But to spare the loyal Trojans such a monstrous fate, risking that harbor, touching those level shores, Neptune swelled their sails with following winds, and gave them a swift escape, speeding them past the churned shoals unharmed. Now the sea was going red with the rays of dawn. From the heavens gold aurora shone in her rose-red car. When the wind died down, suddenly every breeze fell flat, and the oars struggled against the sluggish leaden swell. But now Aeneas, still at sea, scanning the open, spots an enormous wood and running through it, the Tiber in all its glory, rapid, where pools golden with sand and bursting out to sea. And over it, rounded birds, all kinds, haunted the river bed and banks, entrance the air with their song and flutter through the tree. Change course, he commands his men. Turn prows to land, and he enters the great shedded river, overjoyed.
Thank you. Thank you. So Aeneas does something that, well, what does Circe bring to mind? Who was involved with Circe? Who? I thought I heard somebody say. Who spent some time with Circe? Odysseus, right? So this passage is comparing Aeneas to Odysseus, right? Odysseus spent some time on the island of Circe and his men fell under her spell, so on, and you remember this, and they were there for a whole year, and so on, okay? But Aeneas is better. Aeneas is better because he avoids that, right? He's also better because Neptune is speeding his way on, and you remember Poseidon was the great antagonist of Odysseus. So how are the Romans better? How is Aeneas better? Well, he's better because at the very beginning of that passage, it refers to devout Aeneas. And the Latin word for that is pious. Pious Aeneas. He's better than Odysseus because he's pious. He recognizes his responsibility to his family, right? And he's better because he recognizes his responsibility to his clientes. When Odysseus returns back to Ithaca, who's with him?
No one.
No one. What kind of Patronus is that? Okay. He lost his entire crew. He shows up buck naked, okay, on the island of Scheria with the Phaeacians. He's got nothing. All right. What kind of commander, what kind of leader is that whose entire crew, whose entire following dies? That's not going to happen for Aeneas. He's going to protect and save and provide for his followers a new homeland. Really, all of the gods are on his side, with the exception of Juno, and we all know that Juno is eventually going to come around after some sort of compromise. But you can hear in that. So Aeneas is better than Odysseus, right? In all of these measures, right? Okay. So here's another example of how Virgil situates this poem so that his heroes are better than the other heroes, right? Okay, so let's take an example from book 2, okay? Book 1 of the Aeneid. Let's read this. Who's got this one right here? This is from book 1, okay? So what we have here is we're going to compare the Virgilian version and the Odyssean version, okay? So I want you to listen carefully to this, okay? Go ahead.
It was Aeneas, limbs limp and chill fear, groans and lifting both his palms toward the stars, cries out. 3-4 times left, my comrades were lucky to die beneath the soaring walls of Troy, before their parents' eyes. If only I had gone down under your right hand, Diomedes, the strongest Greek of field, and poured out my life on the battlefields of Troy, where raging Hector lies, pierced by Achilles' spear, where the mighty Sarpedon lies, where the Simois river swallows down and churns beneath its tides so many shields and helmets and corpses of the brave.
Thank you. So this is Virgil's version. Let's hear the comparable. So this is in the first book of the Aeneid, right? This storm is going to push them onto the shores of Carthage, right? And this is the Odyssean part. This next passage comes from the 5th performative unit of the Odyssey, after Odysseus has been released from the island of Calypso, and he's all by himself on this raft, and encounters a huge storm caused by Poseidon. This is what he has to say. Go ahead.
The knees of Odysseus gave way for fear, and the heart inside him, and deeply troubled he spoke to his own great-hearted spirit. Ah, me unhappy, what in the long outcome will befall me? I fear the goddess might have spoken the truth in all ways when she said that on the sea and before I came to my country, I would go through hardships. Now all this is being accomplished. Such powers are these, with which Zeus is cramming the wide sky, and has staggered the seas. And storm blasts of wind from every direction are crowding in. My sheer destruction is certain. 3 times and 4 times happy those Danaans were who died then in wide Troy land, bringing favor to the sons of Atreus, as I wish I too had died at the time and met my destiny. On the day when the greatest number of Trojans threw their bronze-headed weapons upon me, over the body of perished Achilles, I would have had my rights and the Achaeans given me glory. Now it is by a dismal death that I must be taken.
Okay, very good. So, the difference is, in this particular Odyssean passage, that Odysseus is all by himself, right? And he's mourning his situation because he's going to die and no one will know about it. In the Virgilian passage, Aeneas is not alone, and both passages refer to something else. In the Virgilian passage, he refers to Diomedes, right? Okay. In the Odyssean passage, he refers to a moment when they battle over the body of Achilles, okay, after he dies. Right? We don't have surviving the part of the epic cycle that describes the death of Achilles, right? But we do have the passage that to which Virgil refers in this little passage about Diomedes. It comes in Book 5 of the Iliad, or the 5th performative unit, and it comes when Aeneas appears for the very first time in the Homeric poems. This is also one of the very first times that Aeneas appears and speaks to us in this poem. Virgil knew his Homer, and you heard that echo about twice and 3 times are blessed those that die under those circumstances, rather than at the mercy of this physical phenomenon, this terrible storm. All right. This poem, you can see in the things that we've examined, how Virgil appropriates and takes that tradition and reworks it with this very important Roman aspects to it that describes for us in the life of Aeneas these very important Roman principles. But this poem is important for us to read for yet another reason, and that is this poem, Virgil composed this poem for Augustus. The greatest poet of the Roman Empire writes his finest poem for the most powerful person to have walked on this planet. Well, what does that mean? Well, when we talk about power, and I'm going to go back to sort of Max Weber's definition of power, these 3 forms of power. Power that comes through political influence, for example, could be political, it could be military. Power that comes through wealth, that is the ability to marshal resources to realize one's aims. And the power of prestige, that is the social capital that one can exert, again, to realize what one wants. And I would make the argument that Caesar Augustus, okay, was a person that marshaled on all 3 aspects, reached the pinnacle of political, financial, and social influence in his time. So let's start with political power, okay? In his 74th year, just before he dies, Augustus wrote sort of a compendium of what he had accomplished in life. Okay? This is called the Res Gestae. The Res Gestae is preserved for us in a few places. Interestingly enough, one of the most important places is on the temple. It's an inscription on a temple that is currently in Ankara, Turkey. So you can go there and you can see this temple that has both a Latin and a Greek version of the Res Gestae. So let's hear Augustus's words about the first part of his life, about one of these registers of power, okay? This is from the Res Gestae, the first 3 chapters.
Aged 19 years old, I mustered an army at my personal decision and at my personal expense, and with it I liberated the state, which had been oppressed by a despotic faction. For this reason, the Senate passed honorific decrees admitting me to his body in the consulship of Gaius Pansa and Aulus Hirtus, at the same time giving me consular residence and stating my opinion, and it gave me supreme command. To prevent the state from suffering harm, it ordered me as a praetor to take precautions together with the consuls. In the same year, moreover, the people appointed me consul after both consuls had fallen in war, the triumvirate for settling the state. Those killed my father, I drove into exile by way of courts of law, exacting retribution for their crime, and afterwards I defeated them twice in battle while they were making war upon the state. I have conducted wars by land and sea, civil and foreign, across the whole world. And as victor, I was merciful to all citizens who asked for pardon. As for foreign peoples, for those whom I could safely pardon, I preferred to preserve than to destroy. There have been roughly 500,000 Roman citizens under oath of allegiance to me. Considerably more than 300,000 of these I have settled in colonies or sent back to their towns after they had completed their terms of service. And to all of them I allotted pieces of land, or else gave them money as rewards for their service. I have captured 600 ships, excluding those smaller than triumphs.
Thank you. Thank you. How many of you are 19 years old? So imagine for a moment, on that fateful day of March 15, 44 BCE, your adoptive father, Julius Caesar, dies. You have just inherited his clients. Most important among those clients are his legions. You not only have his wealth, his personal wealth, but also the wealth that he had accumulated in the civil war against Pompey, and that he had accumulated for his next aspirations, which were against the Parthians. So you also have his legions. This is terribly upsetting to Mark Antony, Caesar's right-hand person, because Mark Antony wanted those legions. But they're not his, they're yours, because you inherited them from your adoptive father, Julius Caesar. And in a year, you have established yourself. This is really a remarkable political genius we're talking about, who managed at the ripe old age of 19, put yourself in this situation. In 1 year, he manages to establish himself as really one of the leaders of the Roman Empire. And in just a few more years, he will establish himself as the sole leader of the Roman Empire and bring to an end 2 generations of debilitating civil war. He had 500,000 soldiers who were his clients. That's pretty good, wouldn't you say? No one in the Roman Empire could match that, which was the reason why he, on the register of political power, was uncontested in the Roman Empire. So let's talk about wealth. All right, what kind of resources did he have? All right, well, he talks about in the Raised Guest Guide that he personally, in a couple of passages, he talks about all the money that he gave away, right? Well, where did this money come from? Well, it came from a whole variety of sources. One of the sources was the fact that the Roman Empire at this particular time was divided into 31 provinces. 21 of those provinces were his. In other words, the administrations of those provinces reported to him. He appointed the procurators or the proprietors to those provinces, and they reported to him. In those provinces were stationed 23 legions. A legion, about 5,000 soldiers. And for each one of those legions, there was typically as many soldiers or forces drawn from the local environment. Okay, so he has control of 21 of these provinces, and the revenues, the extra revenues that came from those, after the expenses of maintaining the military in those provinces were covered, would go into what was called his fiscus. Okay, that was separate from the iarium, or the treasury of the Senate. 10 of those provinces were under the direct supervision of the Senate. 2/3 Augustus, 1/3 the Senate. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's estimated at the end of Augustus's life, of his reign, that the revenues from the entire Roman Empire amounted to about 250 million denarii. And what's a denarius? Well, a denarius, we have to put this in. I'm gonna sort of a thought experiment, just to give you some way of maybe making a comparison. The Roman soldiers, okay, these clientes of Augustus, they received 225 denarii per year. If we were to make an equivalent, say for example, what an enlisted person in the military today makes, which is about $21,000 a year, that would be roughly, a denarius would be roughly equivalent to about $90, about $93. Augustus, he talks about the various sort of gifts that he made to the various Roman people, including his soldiers and so on. His gifts amounted to 600 million denarii. These are just his presents. If we translate that according to the wages of soldiers, that's $54 billion he gave away. The last 20 years of his life, his income just from gifts and inheritances was equivalent to 7% of the revenues of the entire empire. That is astounding, okay? That is astounding. All right, well, let's talk about the last, oh my gosh, we're out of time. Stop, don't, stay. 1 minute. The last thing is prestige. Right? He was declared by the Senate and the people in the Etruscan order the pater patres. And in that phrase coalesce the two most important Roman conventions, the pater familiae, and the patronus. He occupied the pinnacle of the Roman social structure of the empire. He was a client model. Now, this poem, Virgil wrote this poem for Augustus. I want you to figure out where he appears in this poem. As he appears, see if you can find him. Thank you so much for your time.